Today we're going to talk about the Supreme Court blocking Biden's student loan debt cancellation and what the White House is doing to push back. And I interview Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg about his response to being demonized on Fox, what he thinks about those Republicans who voted no on infrastructure but took the credit anyway, how I-95 got rebuilt in record time, and why the White House is focusing heavily on rural broadband that'll help Republican voters who didn't even vote for Biden. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So one of the rulings handed down by the Supreme Court was a 6-3 decision striking down the White House's student loan debt relief program, which would forgive $10,000 in student loans for those earning less than $125,000 per year and up to $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. It had been immediately challenged by Republicans in court because it was popular and they couldn't risk Biden getting credit for popular policy, especially not when the focus right now should be on gas stoves and Hunter Biden. And I should note, just for posterity here, that the people who spent the day celebrating this ruling because the federal government isn't there to bail people out are some of the same people who themselves received PPP loans that were then forgiven by the government. Like, listen to some of this grandstanding by Republicans. Republican Mike Flood: the only person responsible to repay a loan is the person who applied for the loan. The Supreme Court made the right decision in finding Biden's student loan bailout unconstitutional. He had $840,000 in PPP loans forgiven. Ralph Norman: you cannot cancel student loans any more than you can cancel a car payment or credit card debt. $306,000 in PPP loans forgiven. Greg Pence: today's Supreme Court decision to block President Biden's student loan giveaway is a major win for American taxpayers and for the Constitution. This student loan bailout would have forced the 87% of American taxpayers who do not hold any federal student loan debt to foot the bill for those who do. $79,000 in PPP loans forgiven. Chuck Edwards complains, got $1.1 million in PPP loans forgiven. Kevin Hern complains, $1.1 million forgiven. Markwayne Mullin complains, $1.4 million forgiven. Mike Kelly complained, had $975,000 forgiven. Vern Buchanan complained, had $2.8 million forgiven, because apparently letting taxpayers forgive hundreds of thousands, if not millions of debt is totally fine, but $10,000 for those who are struggling to get by, we couldn't possibly allow that. Even Biden echoed exactly that point.
I was trying to provide students with $10,000 to $20,000 relief. By comparison, the average amount forgiven in the PPP, the pandemic loan program, average amount forgiven was $70,000. Now a kid making $60,000, trying to pay back his bills, asking for $10,000 in relief. Come on, the hypocrisy is stunning. You can't help a family making $75,000 a year, but you can help a millionaire and you have your debt forgiven. My plan would not only have been life-changing for millions of Americans, it would have been good for the American economy. Freeing millions of Americans from the crushing burden of student debt. More homes would have been bought, more businesses would have been started, more couples would have had the confidence to start a family. Millions of people would have felt they could get on with their lives. These Republicans blocked all that.
And so as a result, Biden announced a new path to providing student loan debt relief. And I hope even those people who say Biden knew this was legally dubious all along, he knew it would get struck down, he just wanted young people to vote for him in midterms, I hope those people are watching what he's doing right now. So first off, he is reintroducing the forgiveness plan, now using the Higher Education Act as opposed to the HEROES Act, which was the legislation that the first attempt was rooted in. Supporters argue that the Higher Education Act allows the Education Secretary to, quote, compromise, waive, or release student loans. And as far as paused repayments goes, Biden's also announced a 12-month on-ramp for repayment where even if you miss a payment, you won't be at risk of default and your credit won't be impacted. And look, short of a legislative solution, he is doing everything he can. So maybe disregard the attacks by the only people preventing any actual solution from being passed. And I just want to touch on one more thing here. Republicans are trying to frame this as some huge injustice that Biden would even consider allowing the government to forgive student loans. But in doing so, those people are effectively defending the loan sharks. Like, oftentimes, the interest rates on these loans are so high, so predatory, that many people have already completely paid off the principal amount, and yet they're still left with a loan that's even higher than when they first took it out. Like, we hear about this all the time. People who take out a $150,000 loan, they've been making their payments every single month for a decade, and suddenly their principal is now at $200,000. This isn't about walking into a restaurant, for example, and refusing to pay your bill at the end of dinner. This is about trying to get by and repaying your loan amount every single month, and yet somehow still plunging deeper and deeper into inescapable debt. And the fact that Republicans are trying to conflate the two is as clear proof as you will ever see that these people do not care about working people. They care about special interests and the ultra-rich who do not need to worry about student loan debt. My take on this is if my tax dollars could go toward helping regular people who just need a break, then by all means, let's help them. For once, let's give a hand to regular people who are trying to get by instead of watching billion-dollar corporations get our money. Instead of watching the military-industrial complex get our money, instead of watching the ultra-rich get tax cuts. We never hear a single word of pushback when the top 1% get a handout. No one on the right ever decries socialism then. But God forbid a truck driver, a teacher, a cashier, a cook, a small business owner, a nurse gets a little bit of help. Notice how people making millions of dollars are always trying to convince people making $100,000 a year that the people making $28,000 a year are the real problem. And even if that argument isn't resonant with you, even if your position is that you don't want to pay for someone else, full stop, consider this. Biden's student loan forgiveness plan was intended to benefit 43 million Americans. About 20 million of those borrowers would have had their loans eliminated completely. What do you think would happen to the economy when you suddenly make it accessible to 43 million more people? What do you think happens to small businesses, to restaurants, to travel destinations, to clothing stores, to theaters? What do you think happens when people can inject money into our economy's goods and services instead of pumping it into predatory loan sharks? And then when businesses thrive, what do you think happens to the stock market? What do you think happens to your 401k? Allowing people to participate in the economy helps all of us. This is a prime example of a rising tide lifting all ships. And so just think about this for a moment. These are conservative politicians and operatives who have successfully sued to prevent people from having their loan debt forgiven. This won't impact them in the slightest. They just don't want people struggling to get a break. That's all. That's the conservative movement in a nutshell. Make sure that the less fortunate don't get a break, even if it has zero impact on your own life. The fact is that we've been here before. We constantly sit back and watch as Republicans use the same fake populism to glide their way into power, only to then protect not regular people, but the special interests who are screwing those regular people over. If you're the kind of person who has railed against the elites, only to then applaud a Supreme Court decision screwing over regular people trying to escape the grip of predatory lenders, then no, sorry, you're not against the elites, you are one. Here's a preview of my interview with Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, it's been remarkable to see a lot of frequently Republican members of Congress, sometimes in the Senate too, who voted no on the infrastructure package, showing up to either criticize when something goes wrong or to celebrate when we are delivering funding to these communities. Just the other day, my department sent funds to a South Carolina community to improve their transit. And there was a member of Congress there who attacked the funding, attacked the bill, attacked the package, but was there to celebrate the funding when it came to her community. And I think that just shows that at the end of the day, this really is good policy. Look, the sign of a bad policy is the people who supported it wind up changing their minds later and running away from it. And by the same token, I think the sign of a good policy is even the people who voted no try to come back and take some credit for it when it's yielding all those benefits in their communities.
To watch the full interview with Pete Buttigieg, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. To listen to the audio version of this podcast, which includes some exclusive content not included in this YouTube video, that link is also on the screen. And of course, to see more of my content, you can click that link on the screen to subscribe.